I'll join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. You put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks all for being here on this Tuesday evening. Nice to see you all. I think it's good just to take a moment as a reminder for those who are here all the time, or for those who may be here for the first time. The very first thing we do when we begin is we do what's called taking refuge in the Triple Gem. And I remember years ago, we had someone who was been around the community probably 10, 12 years, and he shared that when we first started to do this was at the old Buddha Free location. When we first started to do this, it was really weird to him. And he even shared that what he realized was, I'm facing that way. So he was very just kind of anti-everything. And I'm sure none of you have problems with authority figures or, anything like that. And so he was one of those guys who was like, I'm not doing anything this guy's telling me to do, right? And so he did that for about 2 years. He showed up every week, but pretty much ignored everything for about 2 years. And so he wouldn't join palms. Of course, I didn't know, nor did I actually care, to be honest with you. I don't really know what you're all doing when I'm doing that. And like I said, don't take it the wrong way, but I'm not too concerned what you're all doing. I do that for me. And so what he went on to share was that for about 2 years, he really resisted that in his own mind. And then eventually one day, he found himself at work. And he was really just having a rough day, struggling, pissed off, whatever it was. And he was at his desk. He's telling me the story. And out of nowhere, he just joined palms. And he fought it for 2 years. But then he did it, and he realized it was just kind of a trigger and an anchor that brought him back to a peaceful place in his mind and in his heart, which is what he needed more than anything. But what is it we're actually doing, right? And so just to touch on it briefly, the taking a refuge, just shout out. When you hear the word refuge, what does that mean to you?
Safety.
Safety, what else?
Protection.
Comfort, protection. Anything else? Say again?
Love.
Love. Anything else? And there's no wrong answer here. There's no right answer. It's just a matter for you to reflect on, hey, what does refuge actually mean to me?
Shelter.
So, shelter. Yeah.
I heard someone say taking, and that it's an action. That's it's not passive. We're not waiting for making moves.
Yeah, it's an action. It's kind of moving forward with something. So understanding what refuge is important. Safety, comfort, protection, love. What did you say, Dan?
Shelter.
Shelter. Thank you very much. I knew it was good. It just escaped me because I don't usually hear that one. So then what is it, right? The first one is we're taking refuge in the Buddha. Now, if you're hoping that the Buddha is going to save you, it's not going to happen, right? He died 2,500 years ago, and he cannot help you at all. You are on your own. That's either good or bad, depending upon how you want to look at it. But what we're actually taking refuge in when we take refuge in the Buddha is what's called bodhicitta, or Buddha nature. And the idea that we are human, just like the Buddha was, right? He woke up, he ate, went to the bathroom, slept, probably did a few other things around his day, lived, and then he died. And that's no different than us. So if he could awaken, what we're actually taking refuge in is the bodhicitta, the Buddha nature, the ability to awaken that we all have. So you yourself can end all of your suffering right now. I mean, it's probably going to take a little more than an hour, but I just wanted you to get the idea, right? You yourself also have created all of the suffering in your life. So taking refuge, safety, comfort, protection, shelter, whatever, love in bodhicitta is saying, hey, I can do this. I can be happy. I can be at peace. I can feel okay. The second one is the Dharma. And Dharma, in essence, is the teachings of the Buddha, right? There's capital D Dharma, which is the true nature of reality. But in this context, I find it more applicable to just look at the teachings. Everything we talk about, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, patience, morality, diligence, concentration, all these wonderful key little buzz Buddhist words, right? We know that if we put this stuff into practice, it can actually just change the way we see the world and the way we behave and therefore the way we feel. So it's not just this reading of a book, listening to stuff. It's not even just meditating. You have to actually bring this stuff into your life and then things begin to change. And again, that's on you, right? And the third one is the Sangha, and that's the community. So a lot of strangers in this room, a lot of people you know and love. These are also the same people that you yelled at on the phone today during customer service hour. These are also the people that, you know, you were stuck behind in traffic and they're the ones that cut you off and gave you the middle finger. Those are these people as well. These are the ones that took too long or made your latte the wrong way, right? They're all sitting in this room. And so when we find safety, comfort, protection, and Sangha in community, we recognize that we're just struggling folks trying to get through our day. And if we can realize that we have people to sit with and practice with, challenge us, to motivate us, to inspire us, it can be all right. So, yeah, so taking refuge. And like I said, it's not something that should be forced. It's something that comes into your life when it's important to you. And everybody's at their own place with that. So, all right, so with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. That's actually why I repeat most things that are said. It's for those who are virtual. Now that we've been streaming everything for so long and I've repeated things, I found myself leading groups where there is no camera and I'm actually repeating everything people say, which is kind of annoying. So we'll go ahead and start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are we doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly opening the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation, to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize wherever you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, but began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. We have enough escapes in our lives. Some of them healthy, most of them unhealthy. This is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is filled with chaos, challenges, difficulties. This practice is learning to be with life as it arises. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter. Every moment of your life. That's it. You just have to roam around and be nice to people. And looking at all of you in this room, I'm sure you can do that. Well, most of you. Some of you I know too well. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it's a practice. It's one that takes time. It's not a quick fix. Doing this stuff for 6 weeks isn't going to change your life. Do this for 6 years, you'll start to notice a little difference. I always say if you've been angry and pissed off at the world for 40 years, it's going to take more than 6 weeks to change that. So this is just a daily practice. That's all. Your mess is your mess. And the challenge is we tend to bring our mess into the world. And then who gets to deal with our mess? Our loved ones, our family, our friends, strangers. It's super easy to blame everybody else for all the problems in the world. It's super easy to blame everyone else for all your problems in the world. But holding on to that anger, that resentment, and the fear of what it would actually be like to just set those things down just torments us. Like, what would it be like to just set down all the anger and hatred and resentment that you've been carrying around with you your whole life? It's quite liberating. Not only for yourself, but as well as the people that maybe are holding those to blame. This is learning to be present, because here you are. And if you absolutely hate being here, listening to me right now, then your life sucks right now. You know, and I don't know what else to tell you. But that's the only thing happening in your life at this moment, is you sitting here right now. And every moment of your life is that way. you showing up physically, but are you there mentally and emotionally, or are you stuck in 30 years of whatever? So I'll pause there. For me, I really just always prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll respond to whatever's on your mind. Yeah.
I just had a question about, talking about dependent origination. Is that what you were talking about? And how it always comes back to ourselves and our internal. So can you just share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, yeah, as I always say at the end of every meditation, right? Pratitya samupata, dependent origination, the basis of the Buddha's awakening. So since that's the realization that led to his awakening, it's probably pretty important, right? I mean, the word Buddha just means awakened one. So he was just some dude, Siddhartha, no different than us, roaming around. And he figured out why we suffer. Greed, anger, ignorance, cravings, desires, all in our head. Dependent origination is the deep understanding of karma. Karma is not what goes around comes around. It's the law of cause and effect. Right? This Western culture has ruined the interpretation of karma, as well as many things within Buddhism, but it's a short class, so we'll stick to karma. And karma literally means action. The Buddha said we generate karma, body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do. Right? It's not what goes around comes around. It's like playing pool. You hit the cue ball into the rack. That cue ball, every time hits the rack, every ball goes into a different direction. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. Every person, place, and thing we encounter, we leave an imprint. So the practice is to be very mindful of this law of cause and effect. So, dependent origination, causal relationship of all phenomena. You have any idea who Emanuel Swedenborg is? Really?
Yeah, because I heard you mention it before.
That doesn't mean you know who he is.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a chance. I mean, you threw me off when you said yes. I was expecting some decent answer.
I just know that he founded, he built this church.
He didn't build this church. He died 200 years before it was built. More importantly, do you know who his parents are? No. You are sitting here right now because of his parents. Okay? You walked in these doors because in 1927, a local community, Swedenborgian congregation, decided to build this place. 200, roughly 150 years earlier, Emanuel Swedenborg was around and taught what was known as the Swedenborgian practice community, right? He was alive because of his parents. And it goes endless, but I'll stop at his parents, right? When you come here and sit down, do you think about Emanuel Swedenborg's parents? I'll take that as a no. Start recognizing that without Emanuel Swedenborg's parents, none of us are sitting here right now. Now, take that tiny little example that spans about 200 years and apply that to every single moment of your entire life. You with me so far? Ever been angry at somebody? Do you know anything about what that person had gone through? All you know is what you think they did to you, and therefore you hate them. You don't know anything about them. Understanding the law of cause and effect, dependent origination, can drastically change your life because it allows you to just open up to the endless possibility that maybe we don't know everything. Does that help?
you talk about the principle of Tonglen?
Tonglen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I don't have much to say on it, simply because it's not my practice.
Mm.
So Tonglen is a very specific, a Tibetan Buddhist practice. It's a meditation where you are sending and receiving compassion out into the world, right? It's a beautiful practice. It's not anything I've ever done nor been taught or trained in. Of the various schools of Buddhism, Tibetan is the least of my, I mean, you know, other than a handful of books by Chogyam Trungpa, but that's Trungpa's world. But it's, think of it this way. After I just said not much, now I'm going to give you a response, right? Think of just the thoughts you send to yourself. Do you say kind things to yourself ever about yourself? Once in a while?
I'm better at it now.
Better at it now, right? I mean, for some reason, all these thoughts in our head that we're telling ourselves all day long, and the stories, we don't sit around and be like, man, I'm such a wonderful, kind, gentle person. Did anyone say that to themselves today? Like, wow, you're really wonderful. No, right? So, start sending compassion to yourself. Start thinking about this idea of sending love and compassion into the world. Let's start with you. And then Google Tonglen and get some real Tibetan definition of what it is. But that's the general idea, is that we start sending love and compassion always to ourselves, and then we send it out. But I like to start here, because if we don't take care of here, it's going to make it really tough. Yeah. We were doing, which will come back, we stopped virtually, and the plan was to pause it until we just host it here in person. But Amy and Kayla, during pandemic, started a virtual Tonglen practice when everything we did was virtual for a year and a half, and they were doing it Sunday nights. And we'll bring it back. Yeah. What else? So I heard there's a world's religions class visiting. There's a few of you. And I also heard you get extra credit if you ask a question. That's actually not true, but you know. Yeah, I see a hand. That happened quickly. Did you confirm your extra credit first?
I said, yeah, sure.
What do you got?
How we want like let go of everything like this.
Everything.
Well, not everything, but the negativity, the anger and negativity. You know, I didn't do well because I didn't do this because I'm dumb, or you know, I couldn't get this done at work because. So how do you shift that around? I know it's like practice, but how does one let go of all that anger and negativity?
Yeah. I'm glad you paused, because after 3 examples of all the anger and hatred you have toward yourself, I was going to stop you. Right? You're wearing a hat right now.
Yes.
Yeah? Can you stand up for a minute? Now that I'm completely embarrassing you, you'll get double extra credit for this, right? And what's your name?
Iris?
Iris. So you have your hat on, right?
Yes.
And your question for those virtually is how to let go and get rid of all the negativity and anger and hatred that you're telling yourself and talking to yourself all day long, right?
Yes.
I want you to take your hat off for a second and just set it down. How hard was that?
Really simple.
Really simple. It's the same. But when I said take the hat off, what did you do?
Physically.
Just took it off. What did you not do? Like, oh, I don't want to take the hat off. What's my hair look like? Where am I going to put the hat down? Who is this guy telling me to take his hat off? You didn't create any story around, you can sit down, sorry, I just wanted to, for effect, I wanted the hat aspect of it, right? You didn't create any story around taking the hat off. I mean, I'm a complete stranger. You don't know anything about me. And yet I just told you to take your hat off, and you did. You've known you your whole life. And you won't even tell yourself kind, neutral things. Right? I understand that that example and what I just shared probably won't help too much. But I wanted to illustrate for you that the answer to the question of how do you do it, it's no different than just taking the hat off. That in Zen practice, we call that present time awareness. You were present with the action of taking the hat off and setting it down. Now, all the examples that you gave of all the kind of negative self-talk that you give to yourself, how long have you been doing that? Not trying to call you out on your age or anything, but
As long as I pretty much can remember.
so let's say 30 years. That'll work, right? Yeah, 30 years you've been doing that. And when you do that, you're telling yourself stories about things that happened when? Before. They're not happening now. All the things you say to yourself, about how you hate yourself and this and that and blah, 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 that's all based on the story that you've been telling yourself your whole life. So much so that you begin to believe it. And then you don't even have a choice but to just keep telling the same story over and over and over again. The difficult part to this is not like read page 7 and all of a sudden your life is going to be different. This is spend time every single day for the next 7 years doing a meditation practice. And you'll soon begin to learn how to stay present. When you meditate on sensation of breath or a candle or a flower or whatever you want to use to look at, right? Well, let me start this way. When you're angry, sad, and depressed, your mind is thinking about something that happened at what point in time? Past. When you're stressed, anxious, fearful, or worried, your mind is where? Future. This is where we spend all of our time. All those things that happen. Why did this happen? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? Why did I do this? And then when we finish that whole list, it's like, oh no, how's the rest of my life going to work out? How am I going to pay my bills? You know, what's going to happen to me 7 years from now? I mean, we don't even know if we're going to get home alive tonight. That's the reality. But we've created so many stories in our head. The practice of meditation is learning to be present. It's not escaping. It's just breath in, here I am, breath out, here I am. There is no story to that. When you practice that over and over and over again, day in and day out, year after year, then as soon as a thought arises and you would start to tell yourself some nonsense about what a piece of crap you are, you'll come back to the breath and stop telling yourself that story. But that takes time. But if you've been miserable for 30 years, give yourself a couple years to work on it this way. You'll get there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. What else?
So you're talking about like the past and the future, but what about dealing with like say fear, anxiety, and present? Like as it's happening to you and say your fight or flight response just activates, like how do you deal with that?
Sure. I mean, the question around, I'm talking about past, future, but what about the fear and anxiety in the present moment, right? Well, we could feel fear and anxiety in the present moment, right? But where's our mind? That's a question.
Oh, sorry, I was like,
No, you're good.
Anywhere else but present.
There you go. Anywhere else, but so we can feel, right? And I say this like, I mean, I worked with a lot of people, and I don't mean this in a like. So for me, anxiety was never my thing growing up. I mean, anger, depression, rage, that was it. but I could never connect with anxiety, right? Panic attacks, things like that. And I say this in all seriousness, I don't mean to sound joking. In 2016, the Cubs won the World Series. And I, for the first time, felt like panic and anxiety. Like during this game, I was a wreck. And I was like, oh my God, this is what people live with over like real shit. Every moment. Like I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't breathe. Like I'm a baseball junkie and like everything. And then Chicago, you put that all together and I was in straight panic mode, right? And I was like, wow, this is what it feels like. Your chest gets tight. You can't breathe. You can't speak. Right? So in that moment, I got to feel what it was like to have intense and extreme anxiety, no matter how stupid it was, like when it was over, right? But where was my mind?
I feel like it's still in the present though, no? Because
You missed the
that's not
game.
the future.
You're not in the present. You're worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I understand the question.
Okay.
The question is, well, what about when you feel anxiety in the present moment? First is to understand intellectually that you're only feeling anxiety or fear or worry in the present moment because you're thinking about the future. There's an acronym FEAR, false evidence appearing real. You ever heard that? By the look on your face, I'm going to guess no, right? So that's what's happening. We're false evidence appearing real. We're so afraid about what's going to happen. Now, I think equally, if not more important to your question, intellectually to understand that is one thing, but you're still having like a panic attack in the moment. So then the question is, what can you do, right? There's another acronym, SOBER. Okay, the first one is stop. Just like whatever you're doing, set everything down, just stop. Second thing is observe. Just see what's happening. Okay, this all happens pretty quick, but observe. Just look at the situation, whatever's going on. And then breathe. Take 3, 4, 5, 10 deep breaths. Just slow, deep breaths. And just allow yourself to actually be in that present moment. Because while you're feeling the anxiety and fear, your mind is still way forward, even if it's 30 seconds forward. It's still in the future. So take the deep breath. Then you want to E is expand. Expand beyond that present moment to recognize that life is so much more than whatever you're worried about in that moment. And in that moment, we think it's the end of the world, one way or the other. Right? Like, oh no. And then the last one is to respond. And that would be just to kind of continue to get through it. But I think the stopping and observing and the breathing will help you settle in that moment. But still intellectually understanding that panic, anxiety, fear, worry is minds in the future. That makes sense?
Yeah.
What else?
What was the acronym RAIN for again? What you're saying?
Fear?
No, RAIN.
Rain?
Yeah, the new one.
Oh, I don't know. That wasn't for me. I only know 2 and I used them up tonight. I tap out, yeah.
Can you do the sober one again?
Stop, observe, breathe, expand, expand. And expand is good because, like, you ever been panicked about something? The reality is, and I definitely don't want to minimize trauma. I don't want to minimize, any sort of environment that you're in that might be unsafe, dangerous. Like, fear and panic can be real, and in unsafe situations that you need to remove yourself from. I'm referring to the 90% of the situations that are not that way, that probably 2 weeks from that moment, whatever you're panicked about, you won't even remember, right? That tends to be 90% of what we're panicked about. It's just little stuff that really doesn't matter. And I'm making up 90%. I'm just saying a lot of the stuff we worry about really doesn't matter. So expanding to realize, like, this is not the end of the world. And then respond. Thanks. Go here and then here. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we talk a little bit about like the balancing between, I guess, kind of what we're talking about, like non-attachment and not being anxious and like personal ambition. This
Yeah.
has been, I've heard you talk about this before, but like I had what for me would be a fairly big job interview earlier today. I was very anxious all day. I'm actually doing pretty good now with like, okay, I did my best. Whatever they decide, they decide.
Yeah.
At least now I feel like that. We'll see how that feels tomorrow. But, you know, trying to strike the middle, you know, the middle between doing my best and preparing versus like, I do really want this job or whatever it is, and how do you balance that?
Should we call them and give you like a 2 thumbs up? Maybe
100%.
yeah. Just get them on speaker right now. Well, there's this crazy thing we all often, I don't want to speak for everyone in this room, so my apologies to those of you who don't ever try to control anything. But there's this crazy thing we tend to do, which is try to control things. Yeah. And we actually think that we can worry something or panic or fear something into actually influencing it. Now, the only way that you could influence your interview, you already addressed, and I'll circle back to the heart of your question. The only way you could really influence the interview, which you already addressed, which is you go to the interview, you're prepared, you're not prepared, you do it well, you don't do it, it's done. I mean, so you have an impact. But once that door closes, literally or metaphorically, and you leave the interview, when was the interview? Today?
Yeah.
Right? So other than the follow-up email, which you should be sending by tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest, by the way. You sent it already?
Yeah.
All right. Outside of that, it's out of your hands. It's really out of your hands. So the fear, the anxiety, the worry has to do with this craving we have to try to control it. So understanding that aspect of it first. The balance really is where you're getting at this middle path. Buddhist teaching, just for those who might be new, it doesn't mean that I always tell the college kids this, you're not just like sitting under the trees, looking up at the stars, smoking pot, thinking Buddhism is cool. Like, you're doing stuff. I mean, the Buddhist practice, even specifically with Thich Nhat Hanh and engaged Buddhism, you're very active. So I think of Buddhism as a very aggressive way of life, meaning like you're really active and aggressively trying to do things in your day, but you're coming from a place of compassion, loving kindness, morality, etc. Now, ambition, you mentioned, goals, things like that. You're not just checking out saying nothing matters. But behind that ambition, understand what's the intention. What is the again, not to answer, these are just things to think about from a Buddhist lens. What is the livelihood, right? What is the career? What is the profession? What are you doing to earn money? How is it impacting the lives of other people, right? What's kind of going on there? The Buddha taught that there are healthy cravings, healthy desires, right? Without the desire or craving to awaken, none of us would suffer less. So it's a healthy thing to have a ambition. The danger is, what if you fail? Then how are you? That's where the non-attachment piece comes in. It's not about not having ambition, not having goals, not having aspirations to do well in life. But what's really important in life? And to understand that so many of our ambitions and goals and things we want to accomplish, we are absolutely going to fail at. And so many of them we will absolutely succeed. And in many ways, you answered, or at least already said, everything I'm saying to you in response, which is you left it all on the table, you know. You went in, you did your interview, you prepared, and then you're done. And if you get it, great. And then maybe you get this job. And maybe 6 months go by and you love it. A year go by, you love it. And a year from now, you're sitting here and being, I have a question. I've got this job that I just hate. And I want to leave because my boss is blah, blah. So it's just this constant up and down and ebb and flow of emotions. Have goals, have aspirations. Some of them will work, some of them won't. When they do, yay. When they don't, yay. That's just life. It's a lot of just yay. So I hope you get it, Yeah. If you want it. Yeah.
I had something that happened today that I think you're gonna be really pleased with, because I've been coming here trying to really learn how to regulate myself so I can be more effective in the world. And we talked before about how the benefit of having this hour with you, the temple, the sanctuary, but that really the goal, for me at least, is to be able to practice that out of regulation. And so today, I have a very intense job. It's a job I choose. And it's a very contentious, big personalities. And there's a battle space. So I called a fight, and we were having disagreements, discrepancies about numbers, and I thought we had some legal exposure. And so I called a meeting. It's going to be on Zoom. And when I came to work this morning, I couldn't open my Zoom, and I fired off an email, and they said, "Oh, we changed it to the conference room." So the numbers would have been 1 me and about 8 on the other side, and I was like, my anxiety was shot through the roof. And so just me sitting in my office, deciding what my next move was. And this is where the practice comes in. So I was in this really hyper-aware state. I was just checking in with myself and asking myself questions, trying to determine what the best move forward was going to be. So I was not going to go into that physical space for myself and for them, because nobody needed to go through that together. So what I did was I just sent an email to my supervisor and said, "I'm taking the rest of the day off." And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm telling you, it's like all these things we talked about came together in that moment. It was like a 10-minute thing where I was aware of what's going on. I was practicing compassion to myself, and by not understand it, I heard the word conference room. My first reaction was, "Oh, yeah, let's get it on." And then, but then I just played it through and said, "This isn't going to be good for you.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to lose. There's going to be resentment, and it just wasn't the right thing to do."
Yeah, when I look at, Buddhist, and I appreciate you sharing that, and as I always say, it's not about what we do here, it's how we bring this into our lives. But again, coming back to Buddhist teachings on karma, for me as a practitioner, I would say some of the most life-altering moments were actually things that I chose not to do, as opposed to the things like I chose to do. And obviously, choosing not to do something is choosing to do something. It's still a choice to do something. It's just different. But it all really started with the recognition that this would not be wise, right? We look at the 2 wings of Buddhism: wisdom and compassion. So this action would not be wise. This action would not be coming from a place of compassion. And actually stopping oneself from putting themselves and or others at risk of being harmed in any way is a really important practice, to learn to just stop. And I found that more challenging, but in some ways more accessible, because it's not about trying to create this grand, what is the wisest thing I can go do? What is the most compassionate thing I can go do? What would be the most Buddhist thing I can go do? all those things. You're like, okay, you're in that moment, right? What did Pema Chodron say to do right now? I should do this. And very often it's just not doing whatever you were going to do is very often enough. Because that can really change a situation in a major way. So, what else? We'll do one more question before we close.
Can you talk about the absence of self?
Say again?
The absence of self.
Can I talk about the absence of self? What book did you just read?
Actually, I heard you talk about it the last time I was here.
Really?
Yes.
Aw. Don't pay attention to what I said. So, I'll close with this thought. The Buddhist teachings are on non-self. It's very important to understand that anytime anyone talks about non-self, all they're doing is talking about self, first and foremost. The Buddha praised Subhuti, his disciple. I probably said this last time because anytime I say anything about emptiness or non-self, I always say this. He asked him to give a discourse on emptiness, and Subhuti sat down and said absolutely nothing. And then the Buddha patted him on the back and said, good job, right? I think similar to the response I just gave around not doing certain things, the best way that one can practice non-self in day-to-day life, I find, is to recognize how many things that they are doing that are really just all about them. And again, I'm not saying, like I said earlier, I'm not saying don't take care of yourself. You're important, you're there. Non-self doesn't mean you don't exist. For those who are maybe brand new to the teachings of non-self, it doesn't mean you don't exist. It doesn't mean you're not there, right? If you chop your arm off, it's going to hurt. Don't do that, right? So there is this physical body, and there's a consciousness that is there. But we are here completely different from how we perceive ourselves to be. And again, as a practitioner, I've found the best way to practice non-self would be to recognize throughout my day how many things I'm doing that really are all about me, that come from a place of I am most important. This is my ego, these are my cravings, this is my attachments, and I just need to make sure, I take care of number one. And then the rest of you can trickle in. So when you recognize those things throughout your day, and you stop and you change and you make other people equally as important and a priority, then life becomes less about the self. So I think you even said, when I asked about what refuge meant, you said love, right? So to me, non-self is absolute, unconditional love. Because you don't see any separation between self and other. Right? Kind of the way dogs see us when we come home. Right? So I'll close. Does that help? Yeah? All right. So I'll close with that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right. Quick announcements before y'all head out from our Dharma Bum host, Eddie. And we are looking for a couple more Dharma Bum hosts. So if you're interested, this is what you have to do.
Get to do this. Hello, everyone. I am tonight's host, Eddie. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Ed.